Sing, or you're done here." The words land light, almost playful, but the silence that follows is heavy enough to press against Scarlett Hayes's chest as she stands frozen at the edge of the stage, a silver tray still balanced in her hand, the low hum of laughter and clinking glasses drifting through the grand ballroom like she isn't even part of it, like she's just another piece of furniture in a room where everything gleams under soft golden light and nothing ever feels out of place except her. The marble floors reflect chandeliers that look like constellations, and every guest seems wrapped in confidence, in tailored suits and silk dresses that whisper money without ever needing to say it. And Scarlett feels it again. That familiar awareness that she doesn't belong here. Not really. Not beyond the roles stitched into the black uniform she's wearing, pressed just enough to pass. Her shoes worn at the edges if anyone bothered to look close enough. She tightens her grip on the tray, fingers trembling for just a second before she forces them still, because she knows eyes are on her now. Too many of them. Drawn by the voice that made the suggestion, or maybe it wasn't a suggestion at all, more like a test disguised as entertainment, the kind people with power don't even realize they're giving. "Come on." Another voice chimes in, amused, coaxing. "You heard him. Sing something." And a few people chuckle, not cruel exactly, just careless. The kind of laughter that comes from never having to wonder what it feels like to be on the other side of it. Scarlett swallows, her throat dry, the air suddenly thinner than it was a moment ago. And for a second she considers walking away, just stepping off, disappearing back into the rhythm of carrying drinks and clearing plates, pretending this never happened. But then she remembers the notice pinned to the staff board earlier that evening. Cuts, warnings, one mistake away from losing hours she can't afford to lose, and her feet don't move. Instead, she sets the tray down carefully on a nearby table, the soft clink of glass against wood sounding louder to her than the music still playing somewhere in the background, and she steps forward, each movement deliberate, like she's crossing an invisible line she swore she never would again. The stage isn't really a stage, just a cleared space near the grand piano, but when she steps into the light, it feels like something else entirely, like a spotlight she didn't ask for, didn't earn, didn't want, and yet here it is, holding her in place. She can feel the weight of every gaze, the curiosity, the expectation, the quiet anticipation of something amusing, and her heart starts to pound, fast enough that she wonders if anyone can hear it over the music. "Don't do this," a voice in her head whispers, soft but urgent, the same voice that's been there for years, ever since she folded away that part of herself and promised it would stay there, untouched, unseen. Her fingers curl slightly at her sides, nails pressing into her palms as if that might anchor her, as if that might keep everything else from slipping loose. "Well," someone calls out, impatience creeping in now, and Scarlett exhales slowly, steadying herself the only way she knows how, by pretending, just for a second, that this isn't a room full of strangers waiting to be entertained, that this isn't a test she never signed up for, that this is something else entirely. She lifts her chin, just a fraction, enough to meet the light instead of shrinking from it. And when she finally opens her mouth, the first note doesn't come out as strong as she wants it to. It wavers, fragile, like it might break before it even begins, and somewhere in the room, someone lets out a soft laugh, barely there but sharp enough to cut through her, and she feels it, right in the center of her chest. But she doesn't stop, because stopping would mean confirming what they already think, and something deep inside her, something she buried a long time ago, refuses to let that happen again. The sound of that laughter lingers for a heartbeat too long, thin and careless, but then something unexpected happens, not in the room, not in the crowd, but inside her, because instead of shrinking, instead of letting that fragile first note define what comes next, Scarlett inhales again, deeper this time, steadying the tremor in her chest. The way her father once taught her, slow breath in, hold, then release, and when the next note comes out, it is different, still soft but no longer uncertain, carrying a quiet clarity that does not ask for permission. The room does not react immediately, and for a second she thinks no one notices the shift, but she keeps going anyway, because now it is not about them, not about the job or the stairs or the expectation that she will fail. It is about finishing something she started, something she has avoided for years. and as the melody begins to take shape, the nervous tension in her shoulders eases just enough for her voice to settle into its natural rhythm, warm, controlled, unmistakably real. A few conversations in the back continue, low murmurs of distraction, but closer to the stage, something changes. Glasses pause midair, a couple turns slightly, listening without meaning to, drawn in not by spectacle, but by something quieter, something honest that does not belong to the polished perfection of the room. Scarlett does not look at them. She cannot. Not yet. Because if she meets their eyes, she might lose it again. So she focuses on the far wall instead, on the reflection of light across marble, on anything that keeps her grounded, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the laughter fades, replaced by a different kind of silence, not empty this time, but attentive, at the edge of the room, near a long table lined with untouched desserts, a man who has not spoken once. Since she stepped into the light finally looks up from his glass, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed but deliberate, as if he has been observing everything without needing to be part of it. And when her voice reaches the chorus, fuller now, stronger, he sets the glass down without a sound, his gaze fixed on her in a way that is not curious like the others, not amused, not dismissive, but focused, precise, as if he is listening for something deeper than the performance itself. Scarlett feels it before she sees it, that shift in attention, that weight of being truly heard instead of simply watched, and it unsettles her more than the laughter ever did, because it reaches past the surface, past the safety of pretending this is just another moment to get through. She falters for half a second, barely noticeable, but enough for her to realize how exposed she is, how close she is to crossing a line she has spent years avoiding. An instinct tells her to pull back, to soften, to finish quickly, and step away before this becomes something she cannot control. But then she remembers the worn edges of that old microphone tucked away in a drawer at home, the one she never threw out, the one that still holds echoes of a different life. And instead of retreating, she leans into the note, letting it stretch just a little longer, letting it carry across the room. The man's eyes narrow slightly, not in judgment, but in recognition, as if something has just clicked into place. And the moment hangs there, fragile but undeniable, balanced between a room that is not used to stopping for anything and a voice that refuses, quietly but firmly, to be dismissed again. The note lingers in the air just a second longer than expected, stretching across the polished room like something fragile that no one quite knows how to interrupt. And then it happens, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet authority that cuts through everything else as the man near the dessert table straightens slightly and says, "That is enough," his voice calm but unmistakable. And the few conversations that had started to creep back in immediately stop again, not because he raised his voice, but because he did not need to. Scarlett's breath catches mid-phrase, her eyes instinctively flicking toward him for the first time. And in that single glance, she understands what the rest of the room already knows, even if she does not recognize his face yet, because the shift in energy is immediate. Servers pause, guests turn fully now, and someone near the front lowers their glass as if suddenly aware they are witnessing something they did not expect. The man steps forward just enough to be seen clearly, his expression composed, his presence effortless in a way that suggests this space belongs to him without ever needing to say it. And when he speaks again, it is softer, directed toward her this time. Let her finish, and there is no argument, no hesitation, just compliance. Because people like him do not repeat themselves, Scarlett feels the weight of that permission settle over her in a way that is entirely different from being pushed onto the stage moments ago. And for a second, she does not move, her mind trying to catch up with the sudden shift from spectacle to silence, from being laughed at to being protected. And that word feels strange, unfamiliar, something she is not allowed herself to expect. She swallows, her fingers curling slightly at her sides again. But this time it is not fear that drives her forward. It is something steadier, something that has been waiting just beneath the surface. And when she starts again, the sound that leaves her is no longer fragile. It is clear, anchored, carrying a quiet strength that fills the room without needing to demand attention. The melody unfolds differently now, no longer rushed, no longer defensive, each note placed with intention, and the room listens, truly listens, not because they were told to, but because they cannot quite look away. The man watches her without interruption, his gaze steady, assessing but not cold, as if he is hearing more than just a song, as if he is measuring something deeper, something that cannot be faked in a room like this. Scarlett does not know what he sees. She only knows that for the first time since stepping into the light, she is not performing for approval. She is finishing something that belongs to her. And when the final note fades, it does not collapse under awkward silence the way she feared it might. Instead, it settles into a stillness that feels almost respectful. No one claps immediately, and somehow that makes it more real, because it is not automatic, not polite. It is a pause, a moment of recognition, and then slowly, a few hands come together, followed by more, until the sound builds into something she does not quite know how to process. Not overwhelming, not exaggerated, just genuine enough to make her chest tighten in a way she cannot explain. She lowers her gaze instinctively, not used to this kind of attention when it is not sharp or dismissive, and as she steps back from the light, the man is already moving, closing the distance between them with quiet certainty. And when he stops a few feet away, his voice is low, meant only for her this time. "You were not supposed to be up there," he says, not as an accusation, but as a statement, and before she can respond, he adds, just as calmly, "But you should not have been treated like that either." And for a moment, Scarlett does not know what to say, because in a room full of people who saw everything, he is the only one who chose to acknowledge it. Scarlett's breath is still uneven when his words settle in, not loud, not harsh, but precise enough to cut through the noise that is slowly returning to the room. And for a second, she just looks at him, trying to place where she has seen that level of certainty before, because men like him do not ask questions the same way others do. They observe, decide, and then speak as if the conclusion has already been reached. "I was just doing my job," she finally says, her voice quieter now, steadier than before but still guarded, because gratitude does not come easily when it feels like it might turn into something owed, and she has learned that lesson too many times to ignore it. His expression does not change, but something in his gaze sharpens slightly, as if he is weighing her response rather than reacting to it, and he nods once, almost imperceptibly, acknowledging the answer without agreeing or disagreeing. And then he asks, "Is that what your job requires, or what they decided it requires tonight?" And the question catches her off guard, not because it is complicated, but because no one in this room has bothered to separate those two things before. Scarlett hesitates, just for a moment, and that pause is enough to answer him. Around them, the music has started again, softer now, cautious, like the room itself is unsure how quickly it is allowed to return to normal, and a few guests glance their way, curious but careful not to intrude, because the invisible line around this conversation is clear, even if no one has drawn it. "It is not usually like that," she says finally, choosing her words carefully, because truth, in places like this, often comes with consequences, but tonight it was, and she does not add anything else, does not explain or justify, because she does not owe him that either. He studies her for another second, then shifts his attention briefly to the stage she just stepped away from, as if replaying the moment in his mind. And when he looks back at her, there is something different there now, not sympathy, not pity, but recognition, the kind that does not come from surface impressions. "You have training," he says, not as a question, but as a statement, and Scarlett feels that familiar instinct to deflect rise immediately, to downplay, to dismiss, but she stops herself halfway, because he is not guessing. He already knows. "I used to," she replies instead, the past tense landing heavier than she expects. And for a second she wonders why she said it that way, why she let that part of her slip into the open so easily. He does not press, does not ask why she stopped or what happened. And somehow that restraint feels more disarming than curiosity would have been. Instead, he reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulls out a simple, clean business card. No flourish, no unnecessary detail, just a name and a number printed in sharp black lettering. And he holds it out to her without explanation. Scarlett looks at it, then back at him, suspicion flickering across her expression before she can hide it, because offers in rooms like this rarely come without strings, and she has no interest in trading one kind of control for another. "I am not looking for anything," she says, a quiet boundary drawn between them. But he does not withdraw the card, does not react to the refusal the way others might. Instead, he simply says, I am not offering anything tonight, his tone even. I am giving you a choice for later. And that word, choice, lingers in the space between them, unfamiliar in a way that makes it harder to dismiss. For a moment, Scarlett does nothing, her hand hovering slightly at her side as she decides whether taking that card means stepping into something she cannot predict or simply acknowledging that someone saw her and chose not to ignore it. And in the end, she reaches out, her fingers brushing the edge of the card just long enough to take it, not as acceptance, not as trust, but as something quieter, something she cannot quite name yet. And as she slips it into the pocket of her uniform, she realizes this moment feels less like an ending and more like the beginning of something she has spent years avoiding. The card feels heavier than it should as it rests in the pocket of Scarlett's uniform, a thin piece of paper carrying more weight than anything else she has held that night. And for the next few minutes she moves through the room on instinct alone, picking up glasses, offering polite smiles, nodding at guests who barely notice her again now that the moment has passed. But nothing feels the same. Not the music, not the laughter, not even the rhythm of her own steps. Because something has shifted. Something small but undeniable. She catches fragments of conversation as she passes by, her name not mentioned, but the story already forming in whispers. Did you hear her voice? Who is she? He stopped the entire room. And she keeps her eyes forward, refusing to let those words pull her back into the spotlight she just escaped. Because attention like that never lasts, and she has learned not to depend on it. Across the room, she notices him again, not because he is trying to be seen, but because people naturally move around him, creating space without realizing it, their posture subtly adjusting when he speaks, their tone shifting, respectful without being instructed. And that is when it clicks, not from recognition of his face, but from the way the entire room orbits his presence. Because only one kind of person commands that without effort. Scarlett slows for just a second, watching as one of the event coordinators approaches him with a careful smile, her voice lowered but her body language unmistakable, attentive, almost deferential. And the realization settles quietly but firmly in Scarlett's mind. The man who just handed her a choice is not just a guest. He is the reason this entire night exists. She exhales slowly, looking away before their eyes can meet again, because suddenly the card in her pocket feels different, less like a possibility and more like a door she is not sure she is allowed to open. The rest of her shift passes in a blur, the kind that stretches time and compresses it at the same time, until the music fades, the guests begin to leave, and the ballroom slowly returns to its polished emptiness, chairs being reset, lights dimmed just slightly. The illusion of perfection packed away for the next event. Scarlett finally steps into the quiet hallway behind the main room, the hum of conversation replaced by the distant sound of carts rolling over tile and the low voices of other staff finishing their tasks. And for the first time since she stepped onto that stage, she allows herself to stop, leaning lightly against the wall as she exhales, long and steady, her hand instinctively reaching into her pocket to pull out the card. She turns it over between her fingers, reading the name printed in clean, sharp letters, Alexander Knight, and beneath it, a title that confirms everything she already suspected, not exaggerated, not embellished, just enough to make it clear that his world is nothing like hers. She lets out a small breath that almost turns into a laugh, not because it is funny, but because it feels unreal, like something that belongs in a story she is not part of. You did not embarrass yourself, you know. A voice says from down the hallway, and Scarlett looks up to see one of the other servers, a woman who has worked here longer than she has, watching her with a knowing expression. That does not happen, she adds, gesturing vaguely toward the ballroom. Not like that. And Scarlett nods slightly, unsure how to respond, because explaining it would make it more real than she is ready to accept. Just be careful. The woman continues after a moment, her tone softer now, less warning and more experience. Men like that do not step in unless they see something they want to keep an eye on. And the words settle differently than the ones Scarlett heard earlier, heavier, more complicated, because they come without excitement, without curiosity, just quiet understanding. Scarlett looks back down at the card in her hand, her thumb brushing over the edge as if trying to decide whether it belongs to her or not. And for a moment she considers throwing it away, slipping it into the nearest trash bin and walking out of this night as if it never happened, because that would be easier, safer, more predictable. But instead, she closes her fingers around it and slides it back into her pocket, not as a decision, not yet, but as an acknowledgement that something changed tonight, something she cannot simply undo. And as she pushes herself off the wall and walks toward the exit, the echo of her own voice from earlier still lingers in her mind, not as a memory of fear, but as a reminder of something she is not sure she is ready to face again. For a moment, there is only the sound of her own breathing and the faint hum of the line, and then his voice comes through, steady, unmistakable. "Scarlett," he says, not questioning, not surprised, as if he had already considered the possibility that she might call, and that alone unsettles her more than anything else, because it means this was not just a passing moment for him either. She hesitates, her fingers tightening slightly around the phone, her gaze drifting to the old microphone, resting on the table as if it might anchor her in something familiar. And when she finally speaks, her voice is quieter than she intends. "I was not sure if I should call," she admits, the honesty slipping out before she can reshape it into something more guarded. There is a brief pause on the other end, not uncomfortable, not impatient, just present, and then he replies, "You are not calling because you are sure. You are calling because you are not." And the simplicity of it catches her off guard, because it removes the need to explain herself, to justify the decision she barely understands. She lets out a small breath that almost turns into a laugh, shaking her head slightly even though he cannot see it. "That does not make this any less strange," she says. And this time there is a faint shift in his tone, not quite amusement, but something close. "No," he agrees, but it makes it honest, and for a second, that word lingers between them again, the same way Choice did earlier. Something that feels unfamiliar but not unwelcome. Scarlett glances at the clock on the wall, the late hour making everything feel slightly unreal, like this conversation exists outside the normal rhythm of her life, and she leans lightly against the table, grounding herself. "You said you were not offering anything tonight," she says, her voice steadier now, more deliberate. "So what exactly does that card mean?" And there it is, the question she has been circling since she left the ballroom, the one that matters more than she wants to admit. On the other end, there is a quiet shift, not in hesitation, but in focus, as if he has been waiting for her to ask that directly. And when he answers, his voice is calm, measured. "It means I noticed something that does not belong in the room you were standing in," he says, and before she can respond, he continues, "And I do not make a habit of ignoring that." And Scarlett feels a flicker of resistance rise immediately, the instinct to push back against anything that sounds like she is being defined by someone else's perception. "You do not know anything about me," she says, the words coming a little sharper than she intends. But he does not react to the edge in her tone, does not correct her or dismiss her. Instead, he simply says, "You are right," and then adds, just as evenly, "But I know what I heard." And that lands differently, not as an argument, but as a statement she cannot easily dismiss. She looks down at her hands, at the faint marks where her fingers pressed into her palms earlier, and for a moment she considers ending the call, stepping back into the safety of what she knows. But something holds her there, something quieter than fear, stronger than doubt. "And what happens if I do not call again?" she asks, testing the boundary without fully committing to crossing it. And his answer comes without hesitation. "Then nothing changes," he says, simple, direct. "You go back to your life, and I go back to mine." And there is no pressure in it, no expectation, just a clear line drawn between two paths. Scarlett exhales slowly, absorbing that, because it means this is not about obligation, not about debt. It is exactly what he said earlier, a choice, and for the first time since the night began, that feels real, not like something given to her, but something she can decide. She glances once more at the microphone, then back at the card on the table, and when she speaks again, her voice carries a quiet resolve she did not have before. "If I say yes," she begins, the word unfamiliar but steady, "it is not because I need saving. And there is a brief pause before he responds, his tone unchanged, but somehow clearer. Good, he says, because I am not offering to save you. And in that moment, something shifts again, not in the room, not in the distance between them, but in the space inside her where fear used to be, making room for something she has not allowed herself to feel in a very long time. The line stays quiet for a second after his last words, not empty, but settled, like something important has just been placed between them and neither of them is rushing to move it. And Scarlett realizes that this is the first time in a long time she is not being pushed, not being rushed into a decision she does not understand, and that alone makes her breathe a little easier. She shifts her weight slightly, her gaze drifting again to the microphone on the table, the one she has not touched in years. And something about the way this night unfolded makes it impossible to pretend that part of her does not exist anymore. Then what are you offering? She asks finally, her voice quieter now, not defensive, but searching for something more concrete, something she can hold on to without losing control of herself in the process. On the other end, Alexander does not answer immediately, and she can almost picture him the way he stood earlier, still, composed, thinking before speaking, and when his voice returns, it is just as steady. An opportunity to be heard in the right room. He says, simple, direct, without anyone deciding for you what that should look like. And the words land differently than anything else he has said so far, because they do not promise success. They do not guarantee anything at all. They simply remove the part she fears the most, being forced into something that does not belong to her. Scarlett closes her eyes for a second, letting that sink in, and she realizes that what scares her is not the possibility of failing. It is the possibility of trying again and discovering that she still cares. And if I am not ready, she says after a moment, her voice softer now, more honest than she intended, and there is no pause this time, no hesitation, then you are not ready. He replies, just as evenly, and that answer surprises her more than any other, because it gives her something she did not expect from him, permission to step back if she needs to. She exhales slowly, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the table, grounding herself in the quiet of her apartment, far from the polished expectations of the world he belongs to. And for the first time, the distance between their lives does not feel like a barrier. It feels like a choice she can navigate on her own terms. Where would this happen? She asks, not because she has decided yet, but because the question itself feels like a step forward, and he answers without embellishment. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock, small studio space on the west side. Nothing formal, no audience, just a room and a piano. And the simplicity of it catches her off guard, because she expected something larger, something intimidating, something that would remind her exactly how far out of place she is, but instead, he offers something controlled, something quiet, something that feels almost safe. Scarlett opens her eyes, looking around her apartment as if seeing it differently now. The worn furniture, the soft light, the life she built around staying small, staying unnoticed, and she realizes that this is not about leaving that behind. It is about deciding whether she wants to expand beyond it. You planned this already, she says, a faint hint of curiosity slipping into her tone. And there is the slightest pause before he responds, not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. I prepare for possibilities. And something about that makes her almost smile, because it means he did not expect her, but he did not dismiss the chance that she might appear either. She reaches out, her hand resting lightly on the microphone now, her fingers tracing the edge as if reconnecting with something she has been avoiding for too long. And when she finally speaks again, her voice is steady, not because she is certain, but because she is choosing to move forward anyway. I will come, she says, the words simple but carrying more weight than anything she has said tonight. And on the other end, there is no celebration, no dramatic reaction, just a quiet acknowledgement. 3 o'clock, he repeats, confirming, rather than persuading. And as the call ends, Scarlett remains standing there for a moment, the silence of her apartment wrapping around her again. But this time it feels different, not like an escape, but like the space before something begins. And as she lifts the microphone slightly, testing its weight in her hand, she realizes that tomorrow is not about proving anything to him or anyone else. It is about facing the part of herself she has been avoiding and deciding, finally, whether she is ready to be heard again. The next afternoon arrives quieter than she expects, the kind of calm that feels almost deliberate, as if the world is giving her space to decide who she is going to be before she steps into it. And Scarlett stands outside the studio building on the west side, her hand resting lightly against the strap of her bag, her gaze fixed on the glass door in front of her where her reflection looks back, familiar but different, like something has shifted just beneath the surface. She takes a slow breath, steadying herself the way she did the night before, not because she is afraid of failing, but because she knows this moment matters in a way she cannot ignore. And when she finally pushes the door open, the space inside is nothing like the ballroom. No chandeliers, no polished marble, just a simple room with wooden floors, a piano near the center, and soft afternoon light filtering through tall windows. Quiet and honest in a way that immediately lowers her guard. He is already there, standing near the piano, not in a suit this time, just a clean shirt and rolled sleeves, his posture relaxed but attentive. And when he looks at her, there is no surprise, just a brief acknowledgement, as if this was always one of the outcomes he considered. "You came," he says, not as praise, not as relief, just as a fact. And Scarlett nods slightly, stepping further into the room, her eyes taking in the simplicity of it all, the absence of pressure, the absence of expectation from anyone else. "You said no audience," she replies, her voice steady, and he gestures lightly around them. "I meant it." And for a moment, neither of them moves, the silence stretching not as tension, but as space, giving her time to decide how she wants to begin. Scarlett sets her bag down near the wall, her fingers brushing against the microphone inside before she leaves it there, choosing instead to walk toward the piano, her steps slow but deliberate. And when she stops a few feet away, she realizes that this is the first time in years she is about to sing without being told to, without being pushed or tested or watched by people waiting for her to fail. She glances at him briefly, not for permission, but to confirm what she already understands. And he simply nods once, not instructing, not guiding, just present. And that is enough. She inhales, the same way she did the night before. But this time there is no laughter waiting on the other side, no expectation to meet, just the quiet of the room and the sound of her own heartbeat, steady and certain. And when she begins, the first note comes out clear, unforced, carrying through the space without resistance, filling it in a way that feels natural, like something returning to where it always belonged. She does not rush, does not hold back, each note building on the last, not for approval, not for recognition, but because she wants to hear it herself, to feel it fully. And as the melody unfolds, she forgets about him, forgets about everything except the sound, the way it resonates, the way it settles into the room and comes back to her stronger, more certain. Across from her, Alexander remains still, listening, without interruption, not analyzing, not judging, just absorbing. And there is a subtle shift in his expression, something quieter than satisfaction, something closer to respect. Because what he is witnessing is not talent alone, it is choice, the decision she made to stand here and be heard on her own terms. When the final note fades, Scarlett does not immediately look at him. She lets the silence return naturally, letting it settle